Hello everybody and welcome to a video on my top 10 rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. So as I mentioned in the past few videos I've done, sit down videos explaining what's going to be coming up on the channel, I said I'm going to be doing some top 10 videos. And I think there's no better place to start off than my local park, Blackpool Pleasure Beach. As you'll know if you've watched previous videos, I visit regularly, I have an annual pass. It's about 35 minutes away from me, so yeah, I thought I'd start here. I'm pretty confident with my list, so that's why I thought I'd start here. But as I said, this is going to be one video in a series of videos I'm doing. I have done one top 10 on this channel before, and there's going to be many more to come, so if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below. And also click the bell to make sure you've got your notifications on so you don't miss out on the future videos. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. My top 10 rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. So, coming in then at number 10 we have Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic. This is a track dart ride at the Pleasure Beach that opened in 2013 to replace the old Goldmine dart rides which opened in 1971. So Wallace and Gromit Thrill-O-Matic, as you can imagine, is themed to Wallace and Gromit and features various scenes from various different Wallace and Gromit films. A couple of those including A Grand Day Out and The Wrong Trousers, along with a few others as well. It was created by, or designed should I say, by Blackpool Pleasure Beach, who worked with the creators of Wallace and Gromit, Aardman Animations, to create this ride, basically because obviously they designed the Wallace and Gromit films, or produced them should I say, so obviously to ensure that the ride's the best quality they worked with them. But yeah, and the cars you sit in are themed to slippers, Wallace's slippers. So it's as if you're basically sitting in a large slipper basically, and I really like this dart ride. It features the same track as the old Goldmine ride, but obviously it's basically a retheme pretty much, with new vehicles. An interesting fact for you, when they were building this ride they actually had to enclose part of the River Caves ride. You essentially used to have a bit in the River Caves and on the old Goldmine ride where they would they'd enter this kind of large room, which also featured a restaurant that closed down a few years earlier, and you used to have this big interaction scene. If you don't know, for those of you who've been on River Caves, it's the scene where you now have that like starry ceiling kind of part, where there's not really any theming in there. They didn't bother to put any theming in there because well, originally it didn't need it because it was like that open like cave, so to speak. I guess on the gold mine you could say it was like a big open kind of mine. It was kind of meant to be like an open cave, to be honest, but with the relation of the themes of both of those rides it fit really well. But if the River Caves was not enclosed now, that part of the River Caves, you'd see like a scene of Wallace and Gromit, so obviously they enclosed it basically to avoid that clash of what would, I must say, would have probably been a very weird scene if they kept it open. For those of you, Wallace and Gromit, in relation to that, it's the scene where I believe you just like flown over. There's like a flying scene in Wallace and Gromit, and then the scene after that is above the River Caves. But yeah, so just a bit more information then. The ride was manufactured by WGH Transportation Engineering, and it features 20 scenes. It's just under 4 minutes long. And yeah, it is 275 metres long, so yeah, a reasonable length. And that's all really I have to say about Wallace and Gromit. It's not the best dart ride in the UK, but it's certainly a fun ride, and I particularly like the scene at the end actually, where you've kind of, it's as if the ride's coming to an end, but you then got this, would I say jump scare? I guess it's kind of to make you jump, I don't know. The scene really, it's kind of this big rabbit kind of jumps out, it lights up, you hear kind of a loud roaring noise, and it scares all the small rabbits around it basically. Yeah, and that's if the raw works. But if those of you who went to opening day 2019 at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, you'll know that that didn't work, and I don't think it works like for 1 or 2 weeks after either. But in 2020 on opening day, it certainly did work.
When's it gonna do it? When's it gonna do it?
But yeah, that's all I have to say about Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic. Now on to number 9. At number 9 then we have Avalanche. This is a Mack bobsleigh coaster that opened at the park in 1988. So yeah, Avalanche, basically, if you don't know what a bobsleigh coaster is, you're in these like cars where you sit in line kind of in front and behind each other, as opposed to next to each other. Each car can sit 2 people, and yeah, you basically start off on some normal track, you proceed up a lift hill, and when you reach the top, you're basically released onto this like tubular track. And basically with Avalanche's layout, the car kind of curves down a series of bends, kind of alternating between left and right until it reaches the bottom, and then the right bend curves back up into the brake run, where the car basically then turns around into the station. But on that tubular track, the car is not supported as such. It actually moves freely down the track, but obviously the track is designed in such a way that the ride is safe pretty much. But yeah, it's a fun coaster. One of the weaker coasters at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I don't ride it that often, but it's okay. It can be a bit rattly. I wouldn't say rough, but it can be a bit rattly sometimes. And with the restraints, like how you sat, because you sat in like a sledge style, you're not like sat up on a seat, you kind of sat on this, yeah, you kind of with your legs out in front, so to speak. So obviously the way they have to restrain you in there, it can be a bit uncomfortable, and the lap bar can be quite tight, which takes away from it a bit. But you do get some nice force going around those curves. But you know, I'll take or leave Avalanche. I've not ridden it recently or at all this season. On 2 times I've been, because the other guys from Theme Park Mad who I've been with aren't really a big fan of it. I'd say I probably like it more than them because I do ride it occasionally. But yeah, I'm not bothered if I don't ride it pretty much, you know. I ride it occasionally. If someone else says to me, we'll go on Avalanche, I'll happily go on it, but it's not something I'd choose to ride, so I can happily have visits at Pleasure Beach and just give it a miss, to be honest, and have more rides on some of the other coasters at the park. I should also mentioning Theme Park Mad, for those of you who don't know, Theme Park Mad's another YouTube channel. Go and check it out. But I do go to parks with them, or I have been doing in the past year. They're some good friends of mine. None of these opinions in this video are going to be influenced by them. These are all my opinions, me, Ben, if you didn't know my name. None of their opinions are taken into account when ranking these. These are solely my opinions. But yeah. Also, I'll note the ride is 1,490 foot long, so it's quite a small coaster in terms of length, and it lasts 1 minute 22 seconds, which I think is about right, to be honest. I wouldn't want it to last any longer, because as I said, I don't particularly enjoy it loads, but it's just average, it's okay. But yeah, anyways, on to number 8. At number 8, we have the S&S Shot Tower, or technically named S&S Space Shot, as that is the type of S&S Shot Tower it is, because there are several of them. Yeah, Ice Blast is what we have here. It was originally called, you may or may not know, PlayStation The Ride, when it opened in 1997 as the first of its kind here in the UK. Kind of around the late 90s was when these rides were beginning to be manufactured and being basically installed all over the world. But yeah, basically you start at the bottom. It uses an air-powered system to basically shoot you to the top of this tower, and then you basically free fall down, and then basically you are shot up and down a few times, but kind of the shots, or well, not really shots after that really. You're not shot to the back to the top of the tower after your first launch. You're just kind of slightly up, and then you're left to free fall down, and that's basically repeated a few times. But yeah, the reason it was originally called PlayStation the Ride is because Pleasure Beach got a sponsor for by PlayStation in the late 90s, obviously when it opened in 1997. They chose that because basically PlayStation was popular at the time pretty much, and it was released a few years earlier. Still a very popular console at that time. I'm sure you all know now we're up to, well, the PlayStation 5 to be released in 2020. However, in 2002, the ride's name changed to Ice Blast because Pleasure Beach acquired a new sponsor of Tango, and it was named after a drink basically. And yeah, it's now known as Ice Blast. It's an okay ride. It's quite thrilling when you're shot up to the top. Not really intense. It's actually the first of these kind of rides I've since done Doctor Doom's Fearfall, a shot tower that opened at Universal Islands of Adventure in Florida. And yeah, I do prefer that one. Ice Blast, it's just a bit forceless once you get to the top. That initial shoot up is good, but you just get no airtime at the top, and there's just no real thrill after that. The drops down aren't really that thrilling, but on Doctor Doom's, I believe Doctor Doom's is a little bit smaller, and the way it's done, you kind of still got a bit of momentum when you reach the top of the tower, which means when the tower drops, or should I say the gondola drops, you lifted out your seat and you get some nice floater airtime pretty much. But yeah, it's still okay though. You still get some nice views over the park, but it's just not that thrilling considering I was really nervous to ride it. Well, nervous to some extent anyway. I actually did this ride for the first time back in November last year with Theme Park Mad. It was the first time I went to Pleasure Beach with them, and Josh from Theme Park Mad was like, let's do Ice Blast, and I was just like, well, I've never done one of them before, I'm a bit nervous to do this, but yeah, he convinced me to go on it. I mean, it wasn't that hard, to be honest. I wasn't that nervous. I was thinking about doing it for a while really. You know, I'd done all the other big rides by that point. I was a coaster enthusiast, theme park enthusiast, who'd kind of done a lot of big rides by that point. I did a lot of coasters kind of through 2018 and 2019 really. A lot of the coasters I've done are over the past 2 years. Before then I was quite nervous, but I hadn't really got round to my shot and drop towers yet. So that was kind of the first one I really come to. I'd done Tower of Terror at Disney, at the Disney parks. There's various versions of that ride at the various Disney parks around the world. And I actually think that Tower of Terror, it's more thrilling and you get more airtime and force on that than you do on Ice Blast. I mean, you'd be shocked for a Disney attraction as well. Disney aren't renowned for their thrill rides. Tower of Terror is actually a very thrilling ride, despite the drops being a bit shorter. Where, like on Ice Blast, you obviously drop from the top quite a way down, whereas on Tower of Terror, the drops are typically smaller, although you do tend to get one drop from the top pretty much to the bottom of the tower. But you've got to think, although Tower of Terror's structure, so to speak, is a similar height to Ice Blast, I mean, what is Tower of Terror? It's about 200 foot tall, Tower of Terror's structure. The actual drop towers themselves in the Tower of Terror, or kind of that sort of system, it's a bit different, Tower of Terror, in terms of its manufacturer. They're not that tall in comparison. But yeah, and just Ice Blast is so much more intimidating from the outside than Tower of Terror. But yeah, I loved it when I went on it. Well, I wouldn't say I loved it. I was a bit like, Josh was like, I think, like, how was that? And I was like, well, it was alright. Less forceful than I thought, really. So, I mean, I wasn't disappointed. You know, it was just like average for stuff I'd been on, really. But I didn't really have anything to compare it to at the time, because I hadn't been on another of those SNS rides, but I remember saying to him, Tower of Terror is just so much more forceful than that, because Josh and that haven't been to a Disney park, or at least from my knowledge. I don't think he's ridden Tower of Terror, or he hasn't said he is anyway, or Josh or Danielle, but yeah. Yeah, and then I went to ride Doctor Doom's Fearfall pretty much at Universal Islands of Adventure when I went last year, and I just thought it was so much better than Ice Blast, and I came off that, like, I was shocked. I got airtime at the top of like that tower, and I was like on it, and I was kind of like, whoa, this is just so much more forceful than Ice Blast. So I kind of see where people come from, where they don't really rate Ice Blast now, whereas before I couldn't really compare it in the same. I know I said Tower of Terror was more intense, but that's a different manufacturer, a different story really. But yeah, well, I should say Doctor Doom's is 2 towers, but they're basically identical, pretty much. But yeah, that's all I had to say about Ice Blast. Now on to number 7. Coming in at number 7 then, we have Nickelodeon Streak, formerly known as Roller Coaster. This ride opened in 1933 as Roller Coaster, and then in 2010 it was painted orange pretty much, and it's now known as Nickelodeon Streak to fit with the new themed area Nickelodeon Land. Well, I say new, it opened in 2010 along with the rides, or should I say the reopening of the ride, so 10 years ago, because before the ride was kind of themed to, like, or should I say it was coloured like brown, and the area there before Nickelodeon Land was known as Beaver Creek, but they acquired the IP, Blackpool Pleasure Beach, in 2010, and it's now Nickelodeon Land, and basically they changed the colour because obviously the Nickelodeon Land, you'll know if you've been, it's quite a bright area. Nickelodeon Streak had a dark colour scheme, or should I say Roller Coaster had a dark colour scheme beforehand, with it having that classic brown wooden coaster colour scheme. So they went and painted it orange, and it's controversial, this colour scheme. Some people don't like bright coasters, but I do like it. I think it fits with the overall area quite well, and I'm one for bright colour schemes on coasters, which most people aren't. And I think it's just like a change from the rest of the park, whereas like a lot of the other coasters have like darker colour schemes, but Nickelodeon Street's colour scheme is obviously brighter. It has green trains as well. I do like the colour of the trains. But yeah, it was built by Charles Page, and parts of the old Velvet Coaster, which was a side friction coaster, that was there before Roller Coaster, as it was known at the time. Parts of that were used for parts of the roller coaster, such as its lift hill. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that it did. But yeah, I guess it makes sense, reducing those costs. But the ride is 2,293 foot long, lasting 1 minute and 44 seconds, so it's quite a short ride. But yeah, and it's 61 foot tall, so it's a good family coaster really, family wooden coaster. So pretty much you exit the station, turn around, go up the lift hill, you got another turnaround, and it's an out and back layout from there pretty much. You got a few dips, there's a turnaround, and then you basically return back through some more dips. You do get some nice airtime on this ride actually, especially towards the back on that return journey, should I say. And then you basically turn around back into the station, and that's the end of the ride. It's a fun wooden coaster. It's not the best wooden coaster at Pleasure Beach, but it's fun. Not particularly thrilling, but you do get some nice airtime. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about Nickelodeon Streak. On to number 6. At number 6 we have another wooden roller coaster at the Pleasure Beach, and this time it's Big Dipper. And yeah, this is 60 foot tall, so 1 foot smaller than Nickelodeon Streak. However, it's a bit more thrilling than Nickelodeon Streak, and to some extent offers some better airtime. You actually get this really nice bit of airtime on this ride when you on the front row, actually, surprisingly. It's just one of those hills you kind of flung up into the lap bar. But yeah, this wooden roller coaster is renowned for having got a bit rough in recent years. I personally find it unbearable on wheel seats now, pretty much, unless it's the front row of the front car. However, me and Danielle, I think it was, we did it on a wheel seat at the front of one of the back cars. I can't remember whether it was opening day or the week after, because I've been twice this season, but I know it was this season, and it was more bearable than last season when I couldn't ride it on any wheel seats at the end of last season. So maybe it is a bit better. I haven't dared try it on the back row. I mean, you are brave if you try Big Dipper on the back row. Trust me, it can be very painful on the back row. I did do it on the back row once, never again. But I just remember last season I did it on a few wheel seats, and wow, it's the first drop is the biggest problem. The train, you just feel it shaking to, like, yeah, if you're on a wheel seat. But if you're on a non-wheel seat on Big Dipper, you're in for a pretty smooth ride, to be honest. But yeah, this opened in 1923. So it's actually 97 years old this year, and for the condition it's in, when you consider that how old it is, it's done really well. But yeah, the drops on this are a bit bigger, which kind of make it a bit more thrilling than Nickelodeon Streak. I definitely suggest for someone kind of building up and trying to overcome the fear of coasters, they tackle Nickelodeon Streak before Big Dipper, especially because Nickelodeon Streak is also a little bit smoother, which I guess makes sense with it being kind of 10 years newer, so to speak, which isn't that major in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, this ride's 3,300 foot long, so it's quite a bit longer than Nickelodeon Streak, over 1,000 foot longer. It was built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters. However, it was modified by Charles Page in 1936, because Pleasure Beach basically acquired the land, South Park, kind of where, I guess, the Big One is, pretty much. Kind of rides such as the Big One are over that area, so they actually extended it now, and it goes right near Steeplechase, where Steeplechase is now, Big Dipper, and we kind of where Icon's, the edge of the park basically it goes to, where Icon kind of turns around and comes back. I may or may not be mentioning Icon later in this top 10. But yeah, it was actually one of the first big coasters I did Big Dipper. I remember back in like 2014 going to Pleasure Beach like one random day in summer, and I remember this being one of the first big coasters I actually ever did, so it does have a special place in my heart, Big Dipper. So yeah, but yeah, it's a really good coaster. Naturally, because it is a bit longer than Nickelodeon Streak, Big Dipper also lasts longer as a ride as well. It's 2 minutes 30, but part of that is, I'm sure, down to the fact it has like one of the slowest lift hills on any coaster I've ridden. Well, it technically has two lift hills because it's got that kind of small lift hill at the start, then you go around a couple more turns into the main lift hill itself. But yeah, great coaster, Big Dipper, despite it having got a bit rough in recent years. Because I remember in 2014, it wasn't that rough at all, to be honest. I could ride it on any seat happily. But yeah, if you're on a wheel on Big Dipper now, you know about it, trust me. Or at least you did last year, this year. The one ride on the wheel seat I'd done has been a bit better. And it is hard on Big Dipper not to get a wheel because they have no air gates you can stand behind. Despite there being 6 seats on the train that are non-wheel seats, it's pretty much, yeah, a third of the train. Wait, no, not a third of the train, sorry. You know what I'm saying, 12 seats, sorry. So 12 seats, so half the seats on Big Dipper are non-wheel seats and half are, so pretty much you got a 50% chance theoretically anyway. But I mean, if you're at the front of that queue before they open the gates for you to get on, you've obviously got you've got priority because you're going to get there first pretty much. So if you're at the front of that queue, you can pretty much get yourself a non-wheel seat. You want to be sitting in the 2 middle rows of the train because there's 4 rows per car on Big Dipper trains and 3 cars, so 24 seats per train pretty much. But yeah, if you're towards the back, then I'd try and sit towards the front of the train as possible, as much as possible, because you are more likely to get a wheel seat then. And if you do get a wheel seat, the further towards the front of the train you are in general, the less painful a ride it's going to be for you. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Big Dipper. On to number 5. At number 5 then, we have a ride that might surprise you. Let's just say I've been on quite a journey with my opinions on this ride. Well, I say a journey. Yeah, I didn't like it, and then I rode it again last year, and then I liked it. And that is Grand National, the Mobius wooden coaster. Basically, Grand National, it's technically one coaster, so most people class it as one coaster credit, but it's essentially got 2 tracks with kind of a bit of wood in the middle to separate them. Well, it's let me explain. So basically, it's one track, but you've got 2 sides, and obviously this wooden bit in the middle. So it allows 2 trains to run at once, pretty much, and basically race each other side by side, except for the dispatch. The trains take opposite directions, and then they join up before the lift hill, pretty much. But yeah, and then basically what happens is the side of the track you're on at the end connects to the opposite side of the station, and that works because of basically the way the trains are released at the start. So essentially, when you ride Grand National, you only actually ride half the length of the overall track, and you end up on the opposite side of the station to where you started. So that's essentially how it works. I know, interesting. But yeah, it's 62 foot tall, so naturally the tallest of the wooden coasters at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. 40 miles an hour, and it's 3,302 foot long, so it's also the longest wooden roller coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And yeah, it lasts in total 2 minutes 20 seconds, and it was built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters. And another difference, despite this being basically built by the same people who built Big Dipper, a difference is this ride actually has individual lap bars, and there's a seat divider in between the seats. So obviously you're sat in 2s on this ride, but there's a seat divider between you, which actually is the one on Big Dipper. I think there is, but yeah, there is a seat divider, but you do have individual lap bars pretty much. I think there is on Big Dipper, but correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, this is another wooden roller coaster that's known for being very rough, but it has been said to be smoother in the last couple of years, which brings me on to a bit of a story I have to say about this ride. Back in 2015, for those of you who don't know, I had a kidney transplant in 2014. About 6 months after that, in 2015, I rode this ride. I'd heard about it being rough, however I was convinced on a school trip to basically go and ride it. And I guess I ended up on a wheel seat, but I don't know, but it was absolutely terrible. I just remember being shook around in that train, and the drops are, I'd say, smaller than Big Dipper's drops, but they're steeper, and you get a lot more airtime than on any of the other wooden roller coasters at the park. You are literally flung out your seat on some bits of that ride, and you get a lot of laterals on the corners as well, because the way it's built, and you'll know if you've ridden it, the train does go around a lot of the corners quite quickly. But yeah, I just remember it being awful. I'm thinking I'm never going on this again pretty much. And I was genuinely quite concerned that something might have happened on there, but it didn't. I was fine. I wasn't in any pain after it or anything. It was kind of just painful while I was on the ride, pretty much. It could have been worse than what it was, but it certainly put me off going back on that ride. And then I remember in 2019 a few people had told me it was a bit smoother and that I should get back on it. And I remember it was I'd spoke to Josh a few times about it, and then I thought one time, it wasn't when I was with him, it was back in September last year, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to give this another go. I'm going to make sure I get on an on-wheel seat. The good thing is about Grand National, unlike Big Dipper, it has air gates which allow you to choose your seat, so you can pretty much, if you count the rows right, guarantee to get a non-wheel seat. The best seat I recommend on Grand National is second to back row, because you get the best airtime on that, because Grand National offers the best airtime the further back you are on the train, but you get a nice smooth ride. But yeah, I have heard people say though it is bearable on wheel seats a lot of the time, or it has been in the last couple of years, and that Big Dipper has actually been worse. So maybe I've had worse than I would if I did do a wheel seat on Grand National. However, me and Danielle did do a wheel seat on Grand National in November, but it was front row. And I've heard widely that front row on Grand National on a wheel seat is typically okay, and it was for me. I could tell I was on a wheel seat, but it wasn't rough really. But yeah, it was probably actually one of the best rides I've had on Grand National. Basically just because it was flying on that day, which was the last day of the 2019 season again. But yeah, you get loads of airtime, as I said, and it's really good. Sorry guys, I just had to cut the footage there, but basically, as I was saying, Grand National gives great airtime, and the ride I had on it in September, as you can tell, I enjoyed because I've rode it pretty much every visit to Pleasure Beach since. But yeah, definitely the most thrilling of the wooden coasters, and actually my second favourite wooden coaster in the UK now. I do prefer it to Megaphobia. I know that might be controversial, but I just think Megaphobia is a bit overhyped, whereas Grand National I think is quite underrated. I don't think people talk enough about the airtime it gives. I think because it's so known for being rough, that's kind of what it gets talked about for being. But yeah, it's a great ride. But yeah, thank you Josh for managing to convince me to go on it. I know you weren't there to see my first reactions to me riding it again, but yeah, on to number 4. Coming in there at number 4, we have the Arrow Shuttle Loop Coaster Revolution. Yeah, so this is 56 foot tall, and what's interesting is you actually climb up those 56 feet by going up some stairs, and then you basically get to the top and board the train. And that's because the station is raised. Revolution basically consists of 2 raised sections of track. 635 foot long is basically the total length of the track. You start on the first raised section, and then an electrical winched launch. I know there's a lot of debate over whether this is a launch coaster or not. I think it is. But electrical winch launch system basically launches you off the first section of the track. You then go down a drop into a loop. Yep, this is the first roller coaster on this list with an inversion, and then you basically go up onto another raised section of track, and then you basically stop by some brakes, and then basically there's another electrical winch at that side, and basically the process is then repeated in reverse, so then you basically reach the station pretty much. But yeah. The drop you actually go down on Revolution is 47 foot, and you reach speeds of 45 miles per hour, and the ride itself lasts 1 minute 6. It's short, but it's intense, because on that loop you experience 4 Gs, and trust me, that must be sustained for a good few milliseconds or second, because you definitely feel it. It's really intense, Revolution is, especially when you're going backwards. The ride was also sponsored by Iron Brew, in the 1990s, and then the name was changed back at a later date to Revolution. It was called Irn-Bru Revolution when it was sponsored by Irn-Bru, but it did originally open as Revolution. So basically, to summarise, I really enjoy Revolution. I just think it's a great coaster. It does the job even though it's simple, and you do get some nice airtime when you enter the drops as well, because you are travelling at speed thanks to that electrical winch launch when you reach them. Coming in then at number 3, we have the Intamin Flume Ride Valhalla. This is a combination of a dark ride and a water ride, and it features many special effects. It's obviously themed to the theme of Valhalla, and it uses many water, fire and snow, wind, and it did at one point use lightning effects, but I'll get onto that in a minute. It's one of the longest indoor dark rides in the world. It's 610 metres long. The experience lasts about 6 minutes, and it's actually 80 foot tall, and you've got a 2 foot drop at 70 degrees is the maximum angle of the drops on Valhalla, which there are 3 of. There's a backwards drop, and there are 2 forwards drops. One of the forwards drops is a double drop because you go down a bit of a drop, and then the final bit of the drop into obviously the water splash at the bottom. Yeah, it was closed in 2011 to 2012. When it opened back in 2000, it was one of the most advanced dark rides in the world. However, it costs a fortune to run due to the effects used. It's estimated to cost approximately around £1 million a year to operate Valhalla with the current effects. So in 2011 to 2012, they carried out a refurbishment where they basically tried to replace some of the effects. They obviously replaced the facade of the ride and removed the shop that was there and installed a new exit ramp. Yeah, so I mean, £1 million a year to operate a lot, especially when considering the ride itself originally cost a large £15 million. I know, such a large amount of money for a park like Blackpool Pleasure Beach to install. So yeah, it's cost them a lot over the years, which leads me on to my next point, which is that in between, 2019, at the end of 2019 it closed, and it's due to reopen in 2021. However, due to the current situation, I expect that will be delayed until at least mid-2021, if not 2022. And they're just trying to make it more sustainable again. It's going to be the longest refurbishment that Valhalla's been through since it originally opened. And I expect that they'll be replacing a lot of effects. I mean, some of the highlights in there currently, there's some large fire blasts at the end. There's a water vortex, where basically water comes over you, and it's meant to go over you, but it tends to come down onto the boat. There's an ice room where snow is meant to fall down from the ceiling, and I say meant to. A lot of these effects are also very unreliable, which is another reason why the park are looking into obviously try and make it more sustainable but also more reliable, because a lot of the time, especially in recent years, people just haven't been getting the ride experience as it's supposed to be. One of the effects they did remove in 2012 was a lightning effect, which comprised of, I believe it was a Tesla coil, and basically you'd have this like massive spark. There's not many POVs of it online before then, but I will put one on a card now, which you can click in the top right of your screen to go and see, that shows the that effect in action. You've now got basically skeletons firing lasers at that bit. It doesn't look very good, and that's the thing. Valhalla, since that refurbishment, has been getting a lot of criticism for being a bit tacky, but I mean, you got to admit the effects there are really good when they do work. I'm just trying to rush through it here because I mean you could talk all day about Valhalla, but I expect that some of those effects will be changed in 2021. If they could, I hope they don't get rid of the water vortex, but they may well do. But what I hope they do is do something like at Chessington. I've not been there since they changed Bubble Works to Gruffalo, but with Bubble Works you used to have similar water vortex effects where, and you might still have in Gruffalo, I can't remember from POVs I've watched, it's a while since I watched a POV of it, where water basically comes over you but it doesn't get you that wet. You'll get dripped on, but you won't get soaked as you do with Valhalla's water vortex, or as you did, I should say, where that was literally the wettest part of the ride. And yeah, if that was on, you would get soaked, and that'd be it for a good few hours, if not the rest of the day, if you got drenched by that. But yeah, on Bubble Works, from what I remember, you didn't get that wet at all because the water vortex basically did what it was intended to do, which I think it did on Valhalla originally, but yeah, it's just got more and more unreliable, and it's basically depositing water now on you instead of over you. However, I've heard even like when it first opened that it still did that occasionally. But yeah, Valhalla's a great ride. I love the effects. It is really good. It's the best dark ride in the UK, in my opinion. And even better so when the effects work. I probably would, to be honest, put it even higher in the top 10 if its effects were consistent, but they're just so inconsistent in recent years, and I'm not convinced from the rides I've had on it that I've had a proper experience on it at all, really. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Valhalla. On to number 2. Coming in there at number 2 then, we have the Aerodynamics Hypercoaster Big One, originally known as Pepsi Max Big One. Yeah, this opened in 1994 and still remains the tallest roller coaster in the UK. When it opened, it was the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world. And yeah, this roller coaster was inspired heavily by the roller coaster Magnum XL 200, which opened in Cedar Point as the first ever hypercoaster back in 1989. Cedar Point being in Ohio, in the United States of America. But yeah, however, it's often criticised for having a lack of airtime in comparison to such coasters. Kind of the general opinion in the theme park community of this ride is that it's good for the views, it's thrilling to an extent, but it just doesn't have the airtime there. I feel like that I rate it a lot higher than a lot of other enthusiasts in the community. But yeah, I know Josh, he prefers Revolution to Big One. And you know, I understand that. I can understand why he would prefer Revolution to Big One because it is more forceful. But this ride, it's 213 foot tall. It reaches speeds of up to 74 miles per hour. It features a 205 foot drop, a 65-degree angle, and you can tell which is the 65-degree drop because the rest of the drops on the ride just aren't steep at all. And yeah, it's 5,497 foot long, and that makes it the longest roller coaster at Pleasure Beach. But I mean, due to its nature of being a hypercoaster, it has a lot more momentum from its speed, so it can be a lot longer, and it lasts 3 minutes. But yeah, I think it's a great ride. You get some great views like that at the top of that first drop. You get one of the best views you'll ever get on a roller coaster. You can see out to sea. You can see over the park if you look right. You can see over the rest and like South Pier, and you can see over the rest of the like Blackpool. If you look over from the left, if you look over to the left, sorry. But yeah, it just doesn't have that airtime really. However, the first drop, I must say, is one of the best. No, let me rephrase that. The first drop on it is the best first drop I've experienced on a coaster. I mean, if you're on the front of the train, you get hung over it for like 5 seconds before you're released down it. And if you're on the back, you get absolutely flung over it. And it has that snappy kind of 90-degree turn to the right, and it is got quite a kick to it, that I must say. And at the bottom as well, you get some nice force. It's not that forceful a ride. It only pulls 3.5 G when it comes to positive G forces, and it's minus 0.5 negative Gs you'd probably think like less than that. People say it doesn't have any airtime, but if you're on the back row on a good day, the wind's in sort of the right direction, because that ride can vary in speed a little bit depending on the wind. Some days it'll run faster than others. If you catch the big one on a good day, you get a bit of airtime towards the back of the train. You know, a little bit of floater airtime, but nothing. Most days you'll just not really get anything at all, really. But yeah, and then after you reach that mid-course brake run, I mean, the ride's pretty much over after that, really. But yeah, it's a great ride. I think it's a really fun coaster. I really enjoy it, and I mean, last year it was a bit rough. When I first rode it in 2018, it was even rougher. I remember coming off it the first time and thinking, I just remember being disappointed. You know, after all these years having built up to riding the big one, I remember I was quite disappointed after my first ride on it, because I found it to be a bit rough and just also not that thrilling. But it's really grown on me over time. It wasn't the best ride I had on it, the first ride I had on it. In fact, it was probably one of the worst rides I've had on it. But I've had some really good rides on it since, and I mean, they've done some retracking, as you'll know, 2020. In fact, they've done more than retrack that. I mean, they've done some serious maintenance on it. I mean, like, I don't know whether it's new wheels or what, but as you'll know, I'm sure you'll probably know, they retrack like one bit of it, but the whole thing feels just so much smoother than it has been. And but yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. The rides we had on it on opening day, we got on it twice. It was running brilliantly. Yeah, but as I was saying, you know, the enthusiasts in general don't really rate it. I feel like the enthusiasts that do rate the big one very highly in general are those that were kind of there in 1994 from the start. And I know I might be sounding a bit stereotypical here, but the older enthusiasts in this community tend to rate it, and also those who it kind of has a special place to them. And you know, there's nothing wrong with rating a coaster highly because it's special to you. I mean, you know, I know in particular some of my rankings, I don't just rate coasters because of their quality. If they're special to me, I'll just automatically I can just automatically connect with them better, and I just naturally like them more. It's perfectly fine. There's no shame in rating a coaster highly because it's special to you, even if it's not the best coaster in the world. So, you know, I respect people's opinions who do rate it highly, and that also applies to kind of those who were there to see it all up, you know, being built and it opening and that. You know, because they've had to build over roads and stuff. Like the big one goes over roads. You know, people complain that it's too high off the ground for too much of its layout, which is why it doesn't have any airtime, and that they should lower the airtime hills. But like, think about it. Like, they've had to build over a lot of rides that were there, when on the grand scheme of things, of rides at the Pleasure Beach, now the big one is one of the newer coasters, despite it being 26 years old this year. It's one of the newer coasters at the park. So you've got to consider that they've had to build over rides, which meant, you know, maybe they might not have been able to build it as low as maybe they intended. You know, it is what it is, really. But yeah, it's a great coaster. You know, I enjoy it, and you know, a lot of other people enjoy it. It's just that they don't, you know, it's not really rated because of its lack of airtime. And I mean, when it comes to my top coasters overall, I mean, it wouldn't rate anywhere near #1 for me. You know, I do rate it quite highly, I think, because that's just because I've not ridden that many coasters, really. I've ridden, like 90 odd coasters. I need to update my Instagram account with my coaster count, actually. That just reminds me. But yeah, it's a great coaster, and let's get on to #1. I'm sure you know what this is going to be. And coming in then at #1 is, of course, the Mack Rides multi-launch roller coaster Icon. Well, what can I say about this ride? I'm sure a lot of you have watched the channel for a while now, you'll know that this is my #1 coaster of all time. Perhaps this is somewhat controversial in the theme park community, but I think this is, you know, I've not ridden that many coasters, as I said before, but Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and for me as a whole, stands out. Many would agree that it's definitely the best roller coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. You know, it's just brilliant. It has absolutely everything. Everything that I've been highlighting throughout this top 10, from airtime to inversions, it has everything. So, yeah, it opened in 2018. It's 52.8 miles per hour. That's the maximum speed it reaches on the second LSM launch. You got 2 LSM launches. Basically, this ride uses electromagnets to essentially power the train forward using magnetic force, essentially. So it'll stop on the first kind of launch, and then it'll be released and be powered along by electromagnets. But the second launch is a rolling launch, which basically means it just flows straight into it, no stopping. As soon as it reaches that launch, the system will come into action and it will be sped up by more electromagnets. But yeah, it's 88.5 tall, the tallest point on the ride being the Junior Immelman, and it has an 82-foot drop. It lasts 2 minutes 41 seconds, and it is 3,750 foot long, so a nice long coaster. But yeah, essentially you start off, as I said, you come out the station, you stopped on that launch, you then launch to, I believe it's about 49 miles per hour, around about that, and you then proceed up into a top hat. Some call it a top hat, some call it an airtime hill, and you get some really nice ejector airtime on that. And you'll know from this top 10, I love airtime, so I really do like that element. I think it's one of the best elements on the ride. At the top you'll get the airtime going into the airtime hill, but at the back you'll get the airtime when you basically drag down it, because obviously the front of the train goes down first, and then you drag down it. But obviously when you're travelling towards the airtime hill on the front of the train, you hit that airtime hill first before any of the train kind of ascends and like slows down. So that's why you get the full effect when going into the airtime hill. When you set on the front, you then got like an incline loop. And Icon, one of the things me and everyone loves about it and thinks is impressive is the way it weaves between the other rides. You'll know when I talked about Big One, just they had to build over a load of rides. However, Icon is in a way even more impressive because even more rides have been added since Big One, and they've essentially kept the coaster close to the floor. So they've had to go over rides, they've had to go under rides. You know, it goes over the steeplechase, under the steeplechase. You know, interacts with Big Dipper. It interacts with 5 rides around the park. Those being Pleasure Beach Express, Grand Prix, the Big One, Big Dipper, and Steeplechase. And yeah, you've got like this first half of the ride, which is the slower half of the ride, mainly twisting, meandering its way between rides. This is where a lot of the interactions take place. And you then got this 0G roll, where you get some nice hang time because it's kind of slowed down by that point. And at this point the train's travelling quite slow, but obviously you go through that tunnel, you know if you've been on the ride, underneath the kind of exit path, and you hit that second launch. And I say you hit it, these launches aren't that forceful at all. They're LSM launches designed by Mack, and these launches are renowned for being not the most forceful in the world. You know, don't expect to feel a ton of force on them, but the second one is slightly more forceful. You then travel up into the Immelman, which debatedly is an inversion. However, RCDB claims for it not to be an inversion. A Junior Immelman, it's basically got banking apparently of 120 degrees, but it does look like an inversion, and it certainly feels like an inversion when you're on it. And the belief is that because it doesn't reach a complete 180 degrees when you're upside down, or I should be careful what I'm saying here, shouldn't I? Because you don't reach 180 degree banking on it, essentially it's not classed as an inversion by RCDB. However, you are you'll know if you've been on it, like inverted on it. Like I would class it as an inversion personally, but that's a whole other debate really. And then when you come out of that Immelman, if you're on the back, you get some nice pull out of it. and you get some really good ejector airtime again, actually going kind of exiting the Immelman into the drop, basically on at the exit of it. And then this second section of the ride's the faster section of the ride. You've got a couple of airtime hills, some helixes that are quite intense. You pushed into your seat. This ride has a maximum positive G-force of 4.3, so it is one of the more forceful rides on the list. I'd say, don't get me wrong, Icon's not the most forceful ride in the world. But from Blackpool's point of view, I'd say that the only rides are more forceful than it are Revolution and Infusion, despite Revolution's G-force only being 4, because of the way it's sustained at that level, it does feel more forceful than Icon, I'd say. But it is hard to compare them because Revolution's such a short ride. And yeah, now Icon, one of the things people complain about is it does start to slow down towards the end of the layout, and I do agree. If it was a little bit faster, it would be even better. But it's still a brilliant ride because it has everything. It's a fun coaster. I said it's not the most forceful in the world, but it's a fun coaster. That's why I like it. And I said about people having rides that are special to them before. But Icon's more special to me than any ride at Pleasure Beach, because I just remember, the VIP boarding day. I'd seen POVs of Blue Fire years ago on channels like Theme Park Worldwide, and I'd always wanted to ride one of these Mack launch coasters. The idea of having a lap bar to restrain you in inversions was just, I couldn't imagine anything like it, so I was so excited to get an Icon. And I think, I looked at the POV of it and it thought, it looks good, but I don't think it's going to be the most intense coaster I've ever been on. I'd ridden stuff like Dragon Challenge, like, that's a B&M invert, and I thought this isn't going to be the most intense coaster ever, but it certainly looks very good for Blackpool, and it probably is going to be the best coaster at Blackpool. And it's more intense on ride, although it's not the most forceful ride in the world. It's definitely more intense on ride than it looks from POVs and stuff. And I was pleasantly surprised when I went to ride it on VIP boarding day. As soon as I hit that brake run at the end of the ride, I knew it was my #1 coaster. And I think just going through that whole experience as well, being one of the first people to ride it is kind of why I rate it so highly. I've kind of had that special connection with it. And having seen the whole thing being built, watching videos, that No Limits POV that Blackpool uploaded like 2 years before this ride was kind of finished. They really built it up, and it exceeded my expectations, and I think that has a knock-on effect on where I place it. I mean, it's not going to be my #1 coaster forever. When I eventually hopefully get to ride, Taron at Phantasialand, I know that's an Intamin coaster, or Helix at Liseberg, which is widely regarded as the best Mack launch coaster in the world. It's also the biggest in the world. I believe it's the fastest in the world. It's got 7 inversions, whereas Icon's got 1 or 2, depending on if you count the Junior Immelman as an inversion or not. It just looks absolutely incredible, and the airtime, everything about it definitely looks far superior to Icon, and Icon makes me excited for that. But Icon, just to show how good quality it is, and kind of as an example, I went to ride Blue Fire at Europa Park last year in April, and I didn't think it was as good as Icon. Definitely not. It might have more inversions and it had a more forceful launch, but it was shorter, and you just get so much more on Icon. Icon has such better variety. Blue Fire doesn't really have any notable moments of airtime, really. So yeah, that's just to prove to you how high quality Icon is. And Blue Fire's in a park like Europa Park. I know it was the prototype Mack Mega Coaster, or should I say Mack? I know they call it Blue Fire Mega Coaster, but I mean Mack Launch Coaster, really, because it is a launch coaster. But yeah, you know, Europa Park's it's the biggest park in Europe, pretty much. You know, like the best voted amusement park in the world, in the global Golden Ticket Awards. You know, that just goes to show you know, Icon might not be a good coaster like when you compare it on a worldwide perspective, but for the UK, it's absolutely brilliant to have something like that in this country. And I feel like, you know, opinions on Icon are quite mixed. Some people love it, particularly the younger generation of enthusiasts tend to rate it higher. I think that might be something to do with the fact that a lot of the enthusiasts who are a bit older have been able to travel more and ride some of these European coasters, so they don't rate it. And you know, you've got others that think it's okay. It is very split, I must admit. And yeah, it's definitely split as well, whether it is the best roller coaster in the UK. I'd say probably 50% of people, enthusiasts who've ridden it would say it's the best coaster in the UK. However, others would, you know, rate coasters like the Smiler, Nemesis, the Swarm, the Swarm being at Fort Park, Smiler and Nemesis at Alton Towers, and Wicker Man. Some people rate Wicker Man above it, also at Alton Towers, although that is quite a rare opinion. Most people would take Icon over Wicker Man, with Wicker Man being a family coaster that's less thrilling, but better themed. So it depends how much you think theming is essentially in a coaster, really, I guess. But yeah, and you know, all those coasters look great. I've not ridden the Smiler or the Swarm yet, but they both look great coasters as well. I'm not that hyped for the Smiler because I just feel like it's a lot of inversions, really, and it just lacks variety in terms of other types of elements. Obviously it has the airtime hills, but you know, Josh, who I mentioned before, loves it, and he's determined to get me on it after lockdown. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. Stay tuned. Like I said, click the subscribe button below. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Icon, which brings us to the end of this countdown. You know, yeah, I'm probably quite predictable. These kind of listing order was, sorry, probably quite predictable. But yeah, I mean, most people, this list would probably be a bit varied from mine. But I think, as I said, most of us agree that Icon is the best roller coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I know some complain it has a rattle or whatever, but I mean, come on. I mean, the Big One, you know, Grand National, Big Dipper, they're all rougher coasters than Icon. Icon's rattle does not make it rough at all. I know I mentioned about avalanches before, but that is to an extent where it makes the ride a little rough, but nothing major really. But I'm going on now. Thank you for watching. I hope you're all doing well in lockdown. I actually had a bit of a disaster yesterday. I accidentally deleted all the footage I have on my camera. I know, but it's okay because most of it is stored on a hard drive, but hopefully I'm going to get an external hard drive because as an extra backup and to transfer videos to put in archives now that I'm kind of recorded quite a few, because these videos do take up a lot of room and I only have really one backup on my computer's hard drive. I know there's YouTube as well, you can download your videos from YouTube, but I just worry about the quality really. But yeah, a bit of a disaster. Not really lost any footage. When this actually happened, I was going through transferring bits of footage I hadn't already done so to my computer. It's mainly stuff from sit down videos that I've like deleted and wanted to kind of put back on my computer for when I delete footage of this camera. But yeah, that happens. But you know, everything from Europa Park and Florida, all that park footage, I've still got that. That's not been lost. But you know, just stuff for the archives. I know it's on YouTube, but as I said, you know, quality. But it should probably be okay to download if I want to use it again from YouTube. I'm sure from stuff I have downloaded before, I can't notice the quality to be like bad as such. But But now I'm not deleting any videos from my computer. Since kind of 2019, or 2020, sorry, I kept everything. It's just in 2019 I was deleting stuff, but then kind of in 2020 at the start, I thought, hey, I should keep this stuff to use in the future. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did enjoy this video, and be sure to comment your or the order for your top 10 rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach below. And as I said, make sure you subscribe, turn on your notifications by clicking the bell to make sure you don't miss future videos in this series. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.